I sold your Fashion Week tickets for rent money. New York can wait, my brother said. $5,000 tickets I had bought for my daughter Emma's 16th birthday. Mom looked at me and said, Abigail, he has bills, you have a job. I called the agency and requested a refund when the ticket wouldn't scan at the gate. My name is Abigail. I am 38. I'm a financial analyst, and I'm the kind of woman who can tell you exactly how much a small favor costs, because I am the one who always pays for it. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community and who is standing with me and my daughter Emma in the cold shadows of New York City tonight. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I did not stand at the gates of the Lincoln Center and scream at the security guards until my face turned red. Making a scene is a luxury for people who do not have to calculate the cost of their own reputation. As a financial analyst, I deal in data, risk, and mitigation. And right then, the risk was my daughter's heart, and the data told me my family had finally overdrawn their account with me. I looked at Emma. Her mascara was starting to run, black streaks tracing the path of her shattered dreams. She had spent months sketching designs, hoping to see her idols on that runway. She looked at her phone like it was a broken toy. I did not offer a hug or a platitude. Instead, I took her hand. It was cold. I walked her away from the flashing lights and the judgmental stares of the fashion elite. We found a small, quiet cafe 2 blocks away. It smelled like burnt coffee beans and the sharp, clinical scent of the ozone before a storm. I sat her down with a hot chocolate she didn't want and opened my laptop. I did not feel sadness. I did not feel panic. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. I checked my watch. It was 6:52 p.m. In the world of finance, 12 minutes is an eternity. It is enough time to crash a market or save a legacy. I decided to do both. I logged into my banking portal. For 4 years, a recurring transfer of $800 had left my account on the first of every month, like clockwork. It was sent to my mother, Patricia, under the guise of household support. But I knew where it went. I was the silent investor in my brother Tyler's version of a life. I clicked the button labeled Cancel Series. My finger did not tremble. Transaction complete. Next, I opened my business service accounts. Tyler's phone line and his premium car maintenance plan were both tied to my corporate bundle. I had added him years ago when he was between jobs. That job had become a permanent state of being. I pulled up his line and hit deactivate. Then I moved to the car plan, cancel. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a hint of regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. I had been footing the bill for a family subscription that provided me nothing but betrayal. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. This was not revenge. It was accounting. I closed the laptop at exactly 7:00 to 4 p.m., 12 minutes. The structure of our relationship had been permanently altered. I looked at Emma and said, I am not available for their drama anymore, and neither are you. I stared at the glowing cursor on my laptop screen, the reflection of the cafe's harsh fluorescent lights bouncing off my glasses. This was not a moment of impulsive anger. It was the final entry in a ledger that had been imbalanced for a lifetime. To my mother and brother, I was not a person. I was a high-yield account they believed they had a right to draw from whenever their own lack of discipline led to an emergency. I thought about my own budget. Every cent I earned was tracked in a spreadsheet that would make a forensic accountant weep. For 4 years, I had optimized my life to the point of exhaustion. I knew the exact rotation of grocery sales across 3 different zip codes. I knew that if I bought the generic brand oats and skipped my morning caffeine for an entire quarter, I could set aside the exact amount needed for Emma's private art tutoring. I knew which supermarket marked down their poultry at 7 p.m. on Thursdays. While I was busy calculating survival, they were busy calculating their next withdrawal from my soul. In their world, Tyler was a sensitive asset that required constant capital injection, while I was simply the infrastructure that kept the house standing. Mom viewed my career not as a personal achievement, but as a collective resource. Whenever I landed a new client or received a bonus, they didn't offer a congratulations. They offered a new list of debts they needed me to cover. My brother did not have an emergency. He had an audience, and my mother was his primary donor, using my money to fund his delusions of grandeur. I realized then that I had been living in what I call the invisible chain of the survivor. For years, I believed that if I provided enough, if I solved every problem and absorbed every hit, I would eventually earn the right to be loved without conditions. It was a prison without bars, a structure built on the psychological lie of learned helplessness. I had been conditioned to believe my only value was my utility. I was a survivor of their chaos, but in surviving, I had become their enabler. I was footing the bill for a system that was designed to keep me small and them comfortable. I looked at the $5,000 sitting in my account from the refund. To them, that was just a number. To me, it was 1,600 hours of extra analysis, missed dinners with my daughter, and the 1,000 tiny sacrifices of a woman who was determined to give her child a future they couldn't touch. Emma reached out and touched my arm. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. She asked if I was mad at her. That question hit with the force of a total market collapse. I realized that by staying in their system, I was teaching my daughter that her feelings were secondary to their bills. I turned the laptop toward her so she could see the account closed message on the transfer portal. "No, Emma," I said, my voice clinical and certain. "I am not mad at you. I am just done being the silent investor in a family that treats your happiness like a spare change jar." My phone didn't just vibrate, it screamed. The first wave of digital hostility hit within minutes of the bank notifications clearing. It started with my mother. "Abigail, you are a cold-blooded monster. You would leave your mother destitute because Tyler had an emergency? Your own brother is under so much pressure and you are worried about a dress show?" I watched the notifications scroll across my screen with a detached curiosity. I didn't answer a single one. In the world of logistics and high-stakes finance, silence is often the loudest move on the board. I was no longer reacting. I was observing. Then came Tyler's public assault. He had posted a grainy photo of Emma and me at the stadium gate on social media. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. Some people value the elite fashion world more than their own flesh and blood. My sister just cut off her struggling family because I had to cover rent. Heartless. My mother is in tears. Pray for us. I saw the comments rolling in from distant cousins and family friends who only knew the surface of our lives. How could she? Success has really changed her. Family should always come first. I felt the familiar sting, but it was quickly neutralized by the realization of the system I was looking at. This is what I call the trap of normalized cruelty. In a family like mine, the pathology of the golden child and the fixer isn't a glitch. It is the entire operating system. Tyler's selfishness had been rebranded as sensitivity. My mother's enabling had been rebranded as keeping the peace. To them, my boundaries weren't a right. They were an act of aggression. They had normalized the idea that my labor was their capital. When Tyler stole those tickets, they didn't see it as a crime. They saw it as a necessary reallocation of resources. In their minds, Emma didn't deserve a birthday gift as much as Tyler deserved a consequence-free life. They were utilizing a psychological tactic known as gaslighting to make me feel like the villain for simply withdrawing my consent to be robbed. My mother actually called me a bill that she could no longer afford to manage. She said Emma would get over it because she was just a kid. It was a clinical display of empathy being sacrificed at the altar of Tyler's comfort. I rubbed my thumb over the edge of my laptop. I wasn't going to argue with their version of reality. I was busy documenting it. I took screenshots of every toxic text, every public post, and every irrational demand. I was building a file of facts to replace the fiction they had lived in for decades. "Abigail, please." My dad finally emailed around 9 p.m. "Let's talk. You're tearing the family apart." I didn't reply by phone. I typed back one line, "Email is fine. Talk in this family means pressure until the system goes back to the way you want it." I closed the laptop. The cafe was empty now, the street outside a blur of yellow taxis and rain-slicked pavement. I looked at Emma, who was reading the comments on Tyler's post. I reached over and closed her phone. "Stop looking at the noise, Emma," I said. "We are changing the structure of our lives, and the first step is realizing that their opinion of you is not a reflection of your value. It is just a reflection of their lack of access to your resources. I did not spend the next week responding to their frantic emails or listening to the tearful voicemails my father left. I was not in a state of mourning. I was in a state of forensic audit. On Monday morning, I walked into a glass-walled office in Lower Manhattan to meet Sarah, a colleague from my early days in finance who had transitioned into high-stakes litigation. She didn't offer me a tissue or ask how my heart was doing. She asked for my tax returns and my full credit history. I sat across from her, watching the steam rise from a cup of black coffee. The office smelled of expensive leather and the quiet, heavy weight of law books. It was a space defined by rules, not family feelings. I presented my case not as a daughter who had been betrayed, but as an investor whose assets had been misappropriated. Sarah nodded as she scanned the spreadsheets I had compiled over the weekend. I explained the system, the $800 monthly transfers, the shared phone plans, and the unauthorized access to my account. I told her about the $2,400 that had been stolen and then recovered. But as Sarah dug into my credit report, her expression shifted from professional detachment to sharp concern. "Abigail," she said, turning the monitor toward me, "you mentioned your mother had your login details for emergencies, right?" I nodded once. Sarah pointed to a series of inquiries from 3 years ago. There was a credit line opened in my name that I had never authorized. There were 3 separate personal loans, totaling over $15,000, all tied to my Social Security number, but linked to my mother's home address. The air in the room seemed to thin. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, but the clarity remained. This was the professional escalation I had prepared for. The emotional fog had lifted completely, and in its place was a clinical, freezing light. My mother hadn't just been keeping the peace or helping Tyler. She had been utilizing my identity as a corporate shell to fund their lifestyle. I didn't feel a breakdown coming. I felt like I was closing a loophole. For years, I had been the fixer, the one who absorbed every hit to keep the house standing. I now realized that I had been the infrastructure they were actively dismantling. They hadn't just overdrawn their emotional account. They had committed systemic financial sabotage. Sarah started drafting the first formal notice. It was a demand for a full accounting of all funds accessed under my name. We weren't asking for an apology anymore. We were initiating a recovery plan. I looked at the legal documents and felt a profound sense of control. This was no longer a messy family drama. It was a risk management exercise. I left the office and walked toward the subway. The city was loud, chaotic, and indifferent. I pulled out my phone and saw another text from my mother, asking when I was coming over for dinner to fix things. I didn't delete it, I archived it. I wasn't fixing things anymore. I was liquidating the relationship. Inside my laptop bag was a file that was about to turn my mother's world into a courtroom. I was a financial analyst, and I had finally realized that my family was a liability I could no longer afford to carry. The air in Sarah's office was filtered, cool, and carried the faint scent of high-stakes decisions and old ink. She didn't just hand me the folder. She placed it on the mahogany desk, like a surgeon preparing for a difficult incision. I didn't reach for it immediately. I watched the dust motes dance in the afternoon light, feeling the clinical stillness settle over me. This was the moment the internal audit became a criminal investigation. "Look at the signatures on page 4, Abigail," Sarah said, her voice dropping into that low, professional register used for delivering bad news. I opened the file. There it was. My name, written in a hand that looked almost exactly like mine, but the slant was too steep, the pressure too inconsistent. My mother had spent 3 decades watching me sign my name on school forms, graduation certificates, and birthday cards. She had practiced the loops of my A and the sharp tail of my L until she felt confident enough to commit a felony. It wasn't just one loan. There were 3 separate high-interest contracts from predatory lenders, $15,000 in principal. But with the interest rates and the missed payments, the total liability had ballooned to $32,000. My mother hadn't just been helping Tyler with rent. She had been utilizing my credit score as a bottomless capital resource to fund his delusions of being an entrepreneur. I leaned back in the leather chair. I didn't feel the heat of anger or the sting of tears. I felt the cold, hard weight of a balance sheet that would never again be in the black. I realized then that my family wasn't a support system. It was a Ponzi scheme, and I was the only investor. I had been paying for a subscription to a family that was actively sabotaging my infrastructure while I slept. This is identity theft, Abigail, Sarah said, her eyes tracking my reaction. If we file this, there is no going back. This moves from civil litigation to a police report. This is a criminal twist they won't be able to talk their way out of. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, looking at the forged signatures. My mother had traded my daughter's 16th birthday and my financial stability for a few more months of Tyler's comfort. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. They weren't shocked by what they had done. They were only shocked that I had stopped playing the role of the default payer. I looked at Sarah and said, "File it, all of it. I want a record of every access log, every forged stroke of the pen, and every dollar misappropriated. This isn't revenge. It is accounting." Inside my laptop bag, the files felt like lead. As I walked out into the indifferent noise of Manhattan, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The invisible chain was finally broken. They had stolen my identity, but in doing so, they had given me the one thing I needed to finally walk away without looking back, a reason that was factual, documented, and lethal. The rain was hitting my balcony windows with a rhythmic, clinical precision when the knock came. It wasn't the tentative tap of a guest. It was the heavy, entitled thud of someone who believed they still had a permanent key to my life. I opened the door just enough to see my mother, Patricia. Her eyes were red, her hair damp from the New York drizzle. For a second, a ghost of the old Abigail the Fixer tried to feel a pang of guilt. But I looked past her and saw the $32,000 in forged debt and the memory of Emma's tear-streaked face at the Fashion Week gates. The ghost died. "Abigail, please," she started, her voice cracking in that way she knew usually made me cave. "You have to help. These people, these lenders, they came to the house. They are looking for Tyler. He's terrified. You got that refund for the tickets, and you have your savings. Please, just $50,000 would clear everything and keep them away. He is your brother. He is blood." I didn't step back to let her in. I didn't offer her a chair or a glass of water. I leaned against the door frame and looked at my watch. "You aren't here for me, Mom," I said, my tone as flat as a stagnant market. "You aren't here because you realized you stole my identity or broke your granddaughter's heart on her 16th birthday. You are here because the high-interest debt you signed my name to has finally come to collect, and your golden child is out of luck. You aren't looking for a daughter. You're looking for a bailout." "How can you be so cold?" she sobbed, her big, dramatic tears spilling over. "We are family. Blood is everything. You're better than us because you work, so you should help." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and handed it to her. It was the formal notice of the police report I had filed for identity theft and credit fraud. "No," I said. "Blood is just a biological variable. Family is a contract based on mutual respect and protection, and you breached that contract decades ago. I have spent years believing that if I provided enough, if I solved every problem and absorbed every hit, I would eventually earn the right to be loved without conditions. But I realize now that love was never the product you were selling. It was a subscription I was forced to renew with my own misery, and I am finally canceling the service." She looked at the paper, and her face went from desperate to horrified. "You reported your own mother to the police?" "I reported a criminal who happens to share my DNA. I corrected. Tyler needs professional help and a job, not another capital injection from the sister he robs. And you need to understand that my daughter Emma is not a bill you can move around or a resource